They mocked her scars like she couldn't hear. But when a quiet teenager stood up and spoke 7 words, the entire restaurant fell silent. Ruby had worked at the same small-town diner for 22 years. She wasn't fast anymore, and her hands sometimes trembled when she poured coffee. But every booth, every table, every crack in the tile, she knew by heart. She'd served 3 generations of customers with kindness and grace, never missing a day, no matter how tired she was. But what most people noticed first about Ruby were the scars. Jagged lines ran down the left side of her face and neck, trailing into her collar. Some guessed it was a fire. Others whispered about an accident. But Ruby never talked about it. She didn't need pity, just respect, and maybe a little patience. That day, the diner was busier than usual. A group of teens walked in. Loud, flashy, full of themselves. Ruby approached with her usual warm smile. "Can I get you something to drink, boys?" One of them laughed too loud. "Yeah, how about a new face?" Another chimed in. "You sure she's not part of the Halloween decor?" Ruby didn't flinch. She simply wrote down their orders. But anyone watching closely would have seen her hands shaking. At the next booth, a quiet teenager sat alone, head buried in a book, earbuds in. But the moment those cruel words were spoken, he looked up, and something in his face changed. He stood, walked over to the group, and said calmly, "My mom has scars too. Say it again." The diner went dead silent. Everyone stopped chewing. Everyone stared. The teen's voice wasn't loud, but the weight of his words slammed through the air like thunder. The boys who had laughed just moments earlier now stared, dumbfounded. One of them opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The confidence in their smirks vanished, replaced by awkward glances and flushed cheeks. Ruby stood frozen by the counter, eyes wide, lips parted. Not from fear, but from disbelief. The teenager looked at them again, steady and unwavering. "You think scars make someone ugly? Try watching your mom cry herself to sleep for years after surviving a car crash, and then going to work the next morning so you can eat." His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't look away. One of the boys mumbled, "We were just joking." "No," the teen said. "You were being cowards, and you're lucky someone like her even walked to your table." The entire diner had gone still. Some customers clapped softly. A few nodded. A father at the corner booth whispered to his son, "Did you hear what that boy said? That's what bravery looks like." Ruby turned away slightly, brushing the corner of her eye with her sleeve. She hadn't cried in public in over a decade. But this broke something open. The teenager returned to his seat, calm as ever. But something shifted in the air. Respect. Reflection. A moment the entire room would remember. Ruby walked over to the teen's table with a shaky smile. "You want pie?" she asked gently. He looked up and smiled back. "Only if it's your favorite kind." She chuckled. "Then apple it is." But as she turned to walk away, something deep inside her stirred. Memories she buried years ago. Memories that now refused to stay silent. The hush in the diner didn't fade quickly. Even after the group of boys left, muttering apologies as they slipped out the door, something in the room lingered. A quiet respect. A sense that something important had just happened. Ruby walked back to the counter, placed the pie in the oven, and stood still for a moment. Then she turned, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked back to the teenage boy's booth. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "You know," she said, "no one's ever stood up for me like that. Not once. Not in 22 years." He looked up, surprised. "You didn't deserve it." She gave a soft nod. Then, for the first time, she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. The diner watched in respectful silence. "My scars," she began, "aren't from an accident or a fire." The teenager leaned in. Others in nearby booths did too, but with gentle curiosity. "They're from war." Gasps. A few jaws dropped. "Before this diner, before this town, I was in the army. I served as a medic overseas. I saw things no one should ever see. One day, our unit was bombed. I pulled 3 people out of a burning convoy. 3rd-degree burns took half my face. They told me I'd never walk properly again, never work again, never smile again." She looked down for a second, then smiled. Soft and real. They were wrong. The room was silent. The same hands that carried coffee and plates for 22 years once carried wounded soldiers through smoke and fire. The same face they'd seen every morning had lived through more than they could ever imagine. The teenage boy didn't say anything. He just nodded slowly. His eyes shone not with shock, but deep respect. Ruby placed a hand on his gently. "Thank you for reminding me. My scars don't need hiding. They need remembering." By the next morning, word of what happened at the diner had spread far beyond the walls of that tiny room. Someone had filmed it, the boy's 7 words, Ruby's quiet courage, and the truth behind the scars. The video hit social media like wildfire. Veteran waitress silences bullies with dignity. Teen's 7 words that stopped the whole room. News vans showed up. Customers flooded in. But Ruby stayed the same, serving coffee, smiling softly, her apron tied just as it had been every morning for decades. Only now, people looked at her differently, not with pity, but with pride. A reporter asked her, "How do you feel about the attention?" Ruby just chuckled. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who kept going." But the town thought otherwise. Soon, the mayor stopped by, presenting her with a Medal of Honor from the state. Veterans groups sent letters. Former soldiers dropped by just to shake her hand. And the teenage boy? His name was Arjun. He became a regular, sitting in the same booth every weekend, helping Ruby close shop, walking her home on rainy nights. One day, as they cleaned up late in the evening, Ruby looked at him and said, "You didn't just speak for me. You reminded me that silence isn't strength, truth is." He smiled. "You taught me what strength really looks like." And from that moment on, Ruby's Diner wasn't just known for its apple pie or coffee. It became a place where people came for stories, for kindness, and to remember that scars don't make us broken. They make us unforgettable.